to Leaders of Tomorrow Masterclass, a series of digital-first conversations that we do here on the Leaders of Tomorrow, and we bring you a two-part special series for our daily show. Tonight, we are talking about the opportunity for entrepreneurs in the electric vehicle and the clean energy space. What are the big opportunities? What are the big trends? What are the big events which our experts are calling out for our entrepreneurs? All of that being discussed on the show tonight. Let me quickly introduce our guests. First, Anand, Bharjatiya, CEO of Sun Mobility; Akash Gupta, co-founder and CEO of Zip Electric; Ketan Mehta, founder and CEO of Hop Electric Mobility.
Across the world, it's very critical in a nascent space like EV. When you're trying to build this up, you need government support. Without government support, you cannot kickstart this. You need scale. And before getting the scale, a lot of work needs to be done. And these subsidies help a lot.
The policy clearly incentivizes sale of electric vehicles by giving 40% of the vehicle process subsidy.
There's a huge impetus. It's almost a 10,000 crore, subsidy amount that government has declared for adoption of EVs.
Is the move and the push and the impetus towards the EV space really the solution as far as what's happening on climate change, sustainability? Akash was talking about, some states that are seeing a greater push. Gurugram just recently announcing the largest EV charging station in the country. Is this perhaps an easy solution or an easy answer when it comes to the kind of pollution we are seeing across India?
It's part of the answer. It's a very important part of the answer that we have to move towards. It's the direction we have to move towards, right? Because significant amount of pollution is created through transport, right? So I think if we don't go that route today, when do we plan? EV is not a low-hanging fruit. I think it's something which is a very arduous journey, which I think we've all started on. A lot of work has to be done. I think government has taken a serious commitment of 500 gigawatt by 2030. So it's right there.
Yeah, so I can add to that. See, one thing which is happening via EVs is that one, we are shifting pollution creation, from happening from the roads too far off where the grids are, still being, powered by coal or non-renewables, right? So that is one thing which at least has started, that we are, not using fossil fuels and polluting the cities, and using, electricity to charge the vehicle. So, and which is consuming much lesser, energy with respect to, the kind of pollution that the fossil or IC engine vehicles create. So definitely it's a step in the right direction. The second thing, which is also, very important for us to discuss, is that how the grids also become, renewable, right? And I think there's a lot of work happening on that front to power our grids via solar or wind, or water energy. I think there's a step which is being worked on by the government to ensure that electricity reaches everywhere, and that also becomes renewable.
There's something, there's a lot of innovation going on. Ketan was referring to it, that technology is a very important thing. So there's something called V2G, vehicle to grid. As we innovate, actually these electric vehicles can be powering the grid back there. Right? So a lot of things are, and India as a specific country is one of the largest imports is oil. So for us, it's very, very critical to be on this path.
Speaking of largest, perhaps the biggest challenge that this industry faces is the infrastructure challenge. And perhaps that's why a lot of people don't want to move towards an electric vehicle. But the reason that it's so low in this conversation, and I've pushed it so much lower in this conversation, is because the infrastructure, the charging ports, that is a conversation that's been going on for a while now. Are we moving forward at all in that direction? Are we seeing enough investment? And, if you could answer this both from a consumer's point of view as well as from someone who's perhaps looking at ramping up and being the supplier really of this infrastructure, ports, etc. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? If you can call that out as a trend for someone who's on today's masterclass. Open to all three of you.
I'm sure Anand would love to answer this.
So, Sunanda, I think as of today, infrastructure is not even in percentage points of where it has to be. Yeah. If I take example of today's Sun Mobility, we have one of the largest networks in the country, but with let's say 70 stations today, we want to be 30,000, 40,000 stations by end of 2030. Yeah. That also will not be able to cater to the demand that we are talking about. We're talking about, just to give you a data point, in Europe, to take care of that electric vehicle thing, for every 10 vehicles, you need one charging station. That's the kind of infrastructure you're talking about, right? So a lot of work has to be done. We have just started, and I think that's where I'll come later. We will maybe in the discussion. Battery swapping plays a very different role, and is a game changer.
Okay. Infra is a catch-up game. Would like to add that I know it's a chicken and egg. People are waiting that when the infra will come in, we'll switch to electric. And I think one of the things that gives a huge role for fleet operators to play is that they set up, the entire layer, right? So the fleet operator can bring in the vehicle, can get the infra along, and can ensure that the vehicle is unstoppable. And that's one of the things which is an opportunity in itself to be created, right? That pick up pockets, pick up hub and spokes, and solve it. And then that needs to continue, and which is what many players now are doing. A lot of players are setting up charging stations. A lot of players are doing swapping. A lot of players are creating fast charging batteries. But again, a few states have recently launched a policy on home charging, right? So a bunch of things are happening. It's just about you taking the leap of faith and go electric, and you can actually solve it, is what I can tell the consumers.
Okay, I want to take in a question that's coming to us from Prashant Mathur. He says he's with Lanco Infratech Limited. He's the head of systems there. He says, how do you see charging stations in rural and far rural areas? Is it worth acquiring space for charging stations in these areas as a startup? Perhaps you first, Anand?
It would, at this point of time, see in the commercial, we have to always think in India in terms of personal mobility and commercial mobility. And I think there are many companies which are going in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, and there is a space, there's a very good space in those areas for the e-rigs that we are talking about, where they need, charging stations, and the battery swapping I can talk about. So yes, there is a niche, there is a way that you can work about setting up something in those areas around the e-rickshaws that you're talking about, because the Swiggies and the Zomatos are everywhere today. So absolutely possible.
And speaking of rural areas, how is tier 2 and tier 3 India, behaving differently compared to urban India, compared to India and Bharat? How is that divide really when it comes to the EV space? What insights could you give us? Maybe Ketan first, and then it's open to everyone on this panel.
I think we have seen a very, very strong wave of adoption from across tier 1 and tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities even, where people are not hesitant to switch to electric, because once you give them enough range to run for a day, they are happy charging, these things at home, especially the two-wheelers, where you can just plug in any 15 ampere slot and you can charge overnight. So it's just like owning a mobile phone where you charge, run for a day and then charge for a few hours. So I think we've seen that kind of adoption, but yes, infrastructure has to come. If you have to see that 100% kind of adoption rate in the next 5-10 years, infrastructure will be a very key point.
Since we were talking about what could perhaps drive sales of EV in the country, I also want to talk about is then one of the ways in which, and this is as a trend that I would love for the three of you to call out for our entrepreneurs on today's masterclass. If B2C is a challenge, there's B2B, businesses like the last mile delivery. Is that perhaps also then maybe a solution in terms of trying to push more adoption when it comes to EV? Akash, to you first.
Yeah, so if you look at the market of EV adoption today, while there's a government push, while there's a pull from the consumers, I have dissected the market into three form factors, right? Or three aspects. The first one definitely are businesses, which is logistics, which is ready, up and open in arms to adopt electric because of the clear reasons of one, EVs being cost effective on especially last mile. The driver attrition can be reduced because the drivers are earning a lot lesser because of rising fuel prices, and their own ESG norms, their sustainability mandates are pushing them to go electric. The likes of Amazon, big baskets, and Flipkarts would love to adopt that. So that's my first low hanging fruit today. The second one is anyone who's riding more than 100 kilometers will definitely love to switch electric because that's where they will be able to save more, whether he's living in an urban city or living in a tier 2, tier 3 town. But if the fuel is pinching him because of the long distance journey every day, the switch to electric makes sense. I would like to tell the users that a petrol per kilometer costs you 2.5 to 3 rupees. On electric, this cost will come down to 25 to 30 paisa, right? So it's 1/10 the cost of running, and hence, it makes a lot of sense. So that's the second low-hanging fruit. And the third is the commuters, the young commuters, who drive for within city limits, and they can also look at EVs. So for me, these are the three, territories. The first one is ready. That's what we are, also addressing the market in the same way.
Okay, I'm going to take our second poll question immediately after I have taken an audience question. Akash, you were talking about costs. So this one is coming to us from Dinesh Kagati. He says he's a senior consultant in Power Research and Development Consultants Private Limited. What's the outlook on battery costs and the cost of storage of electricity on a per kilowatt hour basis? Open to all three of you.
So the battery costs in short term, it has been decreasing for last few years, but in the short term, I would say it has taken a different turn. Now it is on the upside because of the supply chain disruptions. But on a long-term view, definitely the technology is going to further improve and it is only going to go down. But yes, next 1 or 2 years will be very difficult because of the commodity prices and supply chain disruptions and all that. So we'll see that, on a upside trend. On the storage costs, on a per kilowatt hour basis, it depends on how many hours you want to store really. But if I talk about a normal 2 to 4 hour storage, it might cost anywhere between 6 to 8 rupees per unit at least, to store electricity and then transfer it to the grid back.
I'm going to slip in a short break. On that note, we're back in just a moment. Welcome back with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow Masterclass. Let me take in our second poll question then, and this is on your screens for all of you who've logged in. Would you make the change if the pricing of electric vehicles was the same as a non-EV vehicle? That's the question to you, our second poll question. We'd love to hear from all of you who've logged in for today's masterclass. I very quickly also want to talk about another issue, if I can call it that, but also call out really at this point the big trend by way of opportunity for entrepreneurs who are in this space. Why is it that we're primarily, barring the three of you, of course, why is it primarily that we're seeing large businesses? Tata being one of the front runners when it comes to the EV space, Ford perhaps revisiting its decision to be in India, not be in India, perhaps being led by, of course, what's happening in the EV space. Why is that happening? What about the small businesses? What's holding them back? Is it the cost? Could you give us personal examples of what perhaps your biggest challenge has been in this space?
So I think there's a resurgence which has happened again, while Ford is discussing, or why, the large players are still, earlier they were waiting and watching and now they are, coming into the fold, is because of the, signs which have been seen over the last 6 months, right? The adoption curve, the focus of our our finance minister talking about it again in this budget, talking about electrification and, the focus of the PLI scheme. I think, which is why it's a magnet today in terms of the global, businesses wanting to enter India.
Okay. In response to our second poll question, 75% of you have said yes, you would consider switching if prices were brought down. So that's something to think about. A few more questions coming in. How can IT play a better role when it comes to EV adoption? And Anand and Ketan, perhaps if you wanted to respond to the earlier question as well, but give us a bit of a personal example to say, how's competition really changing the landscape in India, and how are you viewing that? And also, if you could respond to this question, which is coming to us from Rajesh Garg. He says he's from Kyndryl Limited Cloud. He's an architect. I hope I've got the name right. In terms of how can IT play a better role as far as EV adoption is concerned?
So, I think EV, the important thing which is happening is that the traditional way of thinking about automobile is shifting. Now it's the new paradigm where energy and auto are getting merged. Earlier you used to buy a vehicle without petrol, but today you have to buy an EV with petrol, which is the battery inside this thing. So both are getting merged in an unseen situation, unforeseen situation, energy and auto sector, and that entire paradigm of new energy which is coming out, and the kind of vehicles which are being built, all electronically controlled, all smart vehicles with IoT. This entire sector is going to transform just like the mobile industry.
We are in battery swapping and we make batteries, right? The biggest spend is in IT and software. Our IT controls how the battery is charged and discharged. On a per second basis, 150 parameters are being transferred back and forth to understand what is the state of the battery, right? So it's absolutely critical. And I think it embedded hardware, embedded software, a lot of technology goes on, but battery is like a moving software there. It's very important.
Okay. This is a repeat question coming to us from Dinesh Kagati, who says he's the senior consultant with Power Research and Development Consultants. He says converting IC vehicles to EVs would probably involve lesser investment for the consumer. However, we hardly find any businesses offering such conversion facility. What are the constraints, and would this be an interesting business opportunity to all three of you?
So it's not, a lot of work is happening in that space, retrofitting. We are working a lot to convert ICE vehicles to EVs, removing the engine, putting in powertrains. A lot of work is going on. So it's not something that is not being done. And I think he's right. It is a low-hanging fruit, but that space is being explored already.
Okay. Subhash Tandon sends us this next question. He says, what are the pollution concerns with electric vehicles and how are they being addressed?
So pollution, I think, is on two accounts. One is on the vehicle side, which is of course addressed because of electric vehicles don't create pollution. The other is the energy which is coming out, coming to charge this electric vehicle. Let's say if it's getting generated from a coal or a gas plant, then that really doesn't solve a problem. So the other side of the thing is the generation of electricity, which has to be from a renewable source like solar or wind, or similar source. So I think both sides has to work equally, generation as well as the application of energy. And the third place where the pollution is caused the most is the mining and extracting of the key sort of minerals to make these batteries and the vehicles and all that. I think that's the third element where recyclability of batteries to make it circular and sustainable is very important.
Okay, I have one last question. I think, there are more questions coming in, but we're running out of time because I do want to give our panelists closing comments. Shubham Bhattacharya says millennials are moving more towards ride sharing. So it seems like the share of the wallet when it comes to sales of any vehicle, not just EV, is going to get even lesser. How does the industry then address this challenge? To all three of you?
We'd love that. I think that's what we'd like industry
you would
to
love
move
that,
towards.
Yes. Yeah.
Do shared mobility, save the planet, and let's go mission zero emission is what I can say.
All right, then. With that, let me take closing comments from the three of you. Anand, to you first. Your advice that you would have for our entrepreneurs who have logged in today and who are going to be watching this masterclass. If, as we're ending today, you could call out perhaps what you think is going to be crucial for someone who's in this space to understand about the big opportunities. I know the course of this 1 hour, we've been discussing that. But just one thing that you would like for them to know, perhaps when it comes to an opportunity that you want them to keep their eye on, what would you like to tell them?
There are a lot of opportunities. People should try and understand the EV value chain very carefully and try and understand which part they can play in there. It's a huge thing, and there are a lot of players in the entire game, and from big to small, and they would like to understand which part they want to play, and there is a lot of opportunity there.
Ketan, what was your biggest challenge as someone in this space? And based on that, your learning and your takeaway for someone who's watching today?
I think the biggest challenge for us is to educate people on the benefits and that know-how that why EVs are better and how they can solve their problems and all. You can understand commercially, but to own and operate a vehicle or to buy a vehicle is something completely different when you have to shift your habit from a traditional ICE vehicle. So I think that's the biggest challenge of educating a customer.
A similar question to you, Akash. Your biggest learning, your biggest challenge, and your takeaway for our audience.
Yeah, so 4 years is long. I mean, we did EVs when it was not even a buzzword, right? So from that perspective, I would say our biggest challenge was to bring the entire ecosystem together on a single tech platform, right? Okay. And I think we are not done yet. We've kind of solved some of those challenges, but the journey is becoming interesting as EVs are becoming more massy and more pervasive. At the same time, my key takeaway for the audience here is that EVs today are at a place where internet was 20 years ago, right? Yeah. And at that time, when internet started, a gentleman called Jeff Bezos looked at the opportunity and created Amazon, right? And that was no looking back, creating a crazy behemoth, right? Today, EVs are standing in the same place. It's a sunrise industry. Every problem, within EV, if you go into and you're dedicatedly solving that problem, you'll emerge out as a winner. It's just that you need to be part of the race and not leave the race, being that entrepreneur.
All right, another event that we will hopefully, if I can call it an event or a trend, that we'll hopefully see is also more female entrepreneurs who are entering the automobile and the EV space. And hopefully the next time that we're doing this conversation, we'll also have a few female entrepreneurs who are here on this panel. But gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and for answering all of the questions which have come in today. For all of you who've logged in for today's masterclass, thank you so much. That was part 2 of our exclusive masterclass as far as what's happening in the opportunities in the electric vehicle space is concerned. With that, we're ending tonight's show. If you have any feedback for us, our contact details on your screens as we speak. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.